This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. And I do have a very special guest on today because I met Mark through podmatch.com, and he goes by the name of Gramps Jeffrey, which I'm a little confused because his name is Mark Joseph. So we're going to have to get an explanation there. Um, but what I'm really amazed about is that you started writing books about children, and it's based on you being a grandfather. Did I get all that correct?
Yeah, that was pretty close. First of all, you asked about my name. Now, the reason I'm Gramps Jeffrey is my middle name is Jeffrey,
Okay.
and I spell it Jeffrey. And for years, my wife spelled it the other way. She never learned how to spell my real middle name. So I decided that if I put it on a book, she's going to learn how to spell it. And so now we have an agreement. So my pen name is Gramps Jeffrey.
I love that. That is, I'm never going to complain that my husband forgets my birthday going forward. He remembers me many other days. So, but not being able to spell your name correctly, I love it. Um, so you obviously had children, but when you had your children, you didn't feel compelled to write about them. So what happened when you became a grandfather that you said, hey, I think I have something to put down and share with others?
Well, the title of my book, you see it is I Don't Want to Turn Three. And it all came out, it really came out of the COVID-19 because, we were all in isolation. And I was lucky enough to have all six of my grandparent kids here for about 6 weeks. So I had a chance to really try to understand them, and they all have completely different personalities. But the one thing that these kids had in common was a sense of curiosity. How excited they got when they accomplished something, and watching them grow year to year, and how they interacted with each other was really the reason I kind of wrote this book. What goes through a toddler's mind? They're so desperate for us to understand. When does a toddler really understand the difference between me and you and us? This book kind of explores how the family did that together. It's based a true story. The book's a true story. And as a baby boomer myself, I'm trying to understand, you know, what has evolved since I was 3 years old. And it's all part of the stories. When you think back about it, my parents didn't have cell phones. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have cable TV. They didn't have remotes. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was my dad's remote. He said, "Go change the channel." That's
Yeah.
that's how we grew up. My parents' definition of discipline is completely different than discipline of today. Is that better? How kids are growing up and so forth. I'll let your listeners kind of answer that question. But how are they being treated as we are being treated when we are growing up? So I wrote this book really to read to these grandkids because it's all about them. Their reaction has been fabulous. It gives the star of the book is one of my grandkids, Jordan, and he learns how to discover right from wrong. And so that's what this book is all about. The book is really about at what age do you begin to take responsibility for your actions? Is it 3 years old? Is it 13? Is it 23? I mean, I got plenty of 60-year-olds, 63-year-olds that still don't take responsibility for that. So that's what this book is all about. And that's why I wrote this book.
Well, it's interesting because so many of us as parents, we don't stop and think about those things when our kids are growing up. We just are in the motion of doing things and providing for them, and sometimes just trying to match what the neighbors are doing because otherwise, our kids come home and they cry, that so and so gets to stay up, until 9 o'clock, and I have to go to sleep at 8:55. How dare you, mom? Um, and I know that my two boys were the same way. They were always, trying to compare. And I finally, I think I was probably, I think my kids were probably in their teens when I finally said, You don't live in their house, you live in my house. And it was like, oh, so that's why we have these rules. Uh, but I think as a grandparent is probably much easier to look at your grandkids and say, oh, what are you doing now? And why are you doing these things now? And they're doing them at a different rate today than you and I did growing up as baby boomers or our kids did. So you brought up a really good point. When you were growing up, your parents didn't have cell phones. So if you were outside playing, how'd your mom get you back in the house?
You heard a scream.
Yep.
They said, when the sun comes down, you come home.
Yep, exactly. And today, all these kids have cell phones. They're outside playing somewhere, if they're outside playing. Many of them are probably in the house playing on the computers. But you said that you had all six of your grandkids with you during the pandemic. That had to have been chaos.
Yeah, it was only for 6 weeks, but it was a lot of fun. And another reason I wrote this book is that we have got to be reading more to our kids and our grandkids. In today's world, when you think about it, when a child is born today, as soon as they come out of the womb, they're on the internet.
Yeah.
They've got their cell phones. That's a whole different world than we were growing up. So one of the greatest things the grandparents can do for their grandkids is to teach them and read books to them. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits when you think about reading a book to a child. The one benefit, because again, you're reading a children's book like mine, it takes you 20 minutes, it's not a long period of time. But one of the benefits it is for us as grandparents to read to our kids and make an effort to read to the grandkids is it's a bonding time. It's a chance, where you spend 20 minutes together. It's a good, the child sits on your lap, you open a book. It gives you a chance to really bond with these kids. It gives the kids the feeling of love and security. So that's one reason why we should be reading to our kids every night, our grandkids every night. Another reason that we need to be reading books to our kids is it supports listening skills. Now, you and I both know as we grow older, the listening skills is the number one skill we have. You as a podcaster and a communicator, you have to listen to ask the right questions and follow up. I spent most of my life in business. I got to listen to the customers. What do they want if we're going to sell stuff? So listening skills is one of the greatest skills we can teach these little kids. And having them sit on your lap for 20 minutes reading a book gives you a chance to really, it requires them to listen. It helps them build those skills. And another reason we should be reading books to kids, on top of what they're learning on the internet and so forth, is it helps create cognitive and language development. I mean, when you think about it, it helps to expand on a variety of words. When you're reading a book to a child, they can ask you, what does that mean? Well, it gives you a chance to do that. I mean, there's plenty of words I've read to books, and I had to go look them up,
Yep.
because I didn't understand what they meant. But it helps develop that cognitive and language skills with these kids. And then, the other thing is attention span. When you're a little kid, 2, 3, 4 years old, you're bouncing off the wall, you're running around, okay. Attention span, gives a concentration of self-discipline, and it gives them a chance to spend 20 minutes really paying attention. So we should make sure as adults, as grandparents, as baby boomers, that we are reading to these children to help offset all this other stuff they're learning online. To bring them back to, because these are the skills that they're going to need when they become our age.
Well, number one, they're going to need to read, whether it's reading on the internet, reading a book. Reading is very, very important. Um, the one thing that I love about reading to a child is watching them respond to the words, watching them respond to the pictures in the book. Um, and I used to find that when I would read my sons a story and when their grandmother would read a story, they heard it differently, which I think is very good because that's part of the listening skills. That's part of the interpretation.
Well, it really is. You can use reading to teach. Before you read the book, you say to your grandchild, "What do you think is going to happen in this book?" All right, because you know, I guess if there's one thing that we all walk away from this morning is it's necessary to teach children how to think, not what to think, but how to think. And books do that. So if you start off the conversation and again teaching them how to think, before you read this, what do you think is going to happen? Let them tell you. It may be a fantasy, maybe, but let them tell you that. And then while you're reading the book, you know, who are these characters in the books? What are the settings? How do you relate to that? Again, teaching them, how to think. And during the book, you ask them, does anything like this sound familiar to you? Have you seen this? Have you gone through this? And then obviously after, what was your favorite part? Much like you should be doing at dinner time. What happened? What was your best part of your day today? But reading a book, what was your favorite part? Get them to think. So if nothing else, reading to children helps develop them and teaches them how to think. As they grow older, they're gonna, they'll figure out what to think. But you want to teach them how to think.
How to think. And a lot of young people today are struggling with that. They're letting things think for them. And I just went to a seminar a couple weeks ago, and I was hearing how many young children, when are asked what to think, they say, "Let me Google it." That thing is scary, very scary.
I
So
mean, think about all these vernacular words that are in our vocabulary that weren't around 20 years ago.
right,
Yeah, I Googled
exactly.
it. If I said that to my parents, they would look at me with a blank stare.
And I remember being when I was young, if I didn't understand something, um, instead of my parents telling me to go look it up in the dictionary, my parents would ask me to go get the dictionary, bring it to them, and they would actually read the definition to us and then ask us if we understood it. And if we didn't, then they would break it down, which I always thought was like, oh, this is a break from that story you're telling me. But I didn't realize how much I was learning until I actually, was in high school and college. And hey, I remember hearing that word before. I remember trying to figure out what it meant before. And so we can influence our children in the proper way if we're reading to them and we're answering questions. But you have another book there called The Secrets of Reading. So I want to know what the secret is because I haven't done
Uh,
much reading lately.
This is called The Secrets of Retailing: How to Beat Walmart.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was in my previous life when I was in the business world. I wrote this book.
Oh, I
It's a
see.
it's a step-by-step guide for entrepreneurs and how to succeed.
So you worked with adults and you work with children and you work with the people in between called the parents, which I love.
Well, one of the reasons, and when I wrote this book and I was talking about it, but it became very apparent to me that we, the baby boomer generation, as grandparents, we are really not involved in the raising of our grandkids. 30% of us, that's one out of every three. If you sit in a room, one person on the other side of you, they really don't care to raise or get involved with their grandkids. I mean, they'll go to a birthday party or maybe to Christmas, but that's all their involvement. The philosophy, again, one out of three of us, our philosophy is, hey, I raised some great kids. Let them go raise the kids, their grandkids. I'm going to go play pickleball. Yeah, so a third of us don't care, and that concerned me. And you say, well, why don't we care? Why aren't we involved with the raising of our grandkids? Well, a lot of that has to do with us. We may have had a strained relationship with our kids. We may not have liked the spouse our child married. And so we then also create tension. Things that we do with our kids. I mean, we may give them unsolicited advice, and if your kids are any like my kids, they got their own ideas. They don't need a lot of my unsolicited advice. We may disrespect boundaries by just coming over or dropping in. They don't want that. So a lot of this is caused by us. we push our grandkids away sometimes, undermine our parents' authority. So like for instance, they're over for the weekend. We may be challenging our kids on what they're teaching their children. Their values and their structure. This causes us to not get involved and be pushed away. You know, we as grandparents tend to play favorites. We may have, a bunch of grandkids or kids, and we play favorites now, and then we manipulate some of these siblings. Now, I have a favorite, but I wouldn't tell you. I'm not even telling my wife. That causes all kinds of problems. We may try to influence kids by giving them money and gifts and vacations, and that disrupts the relationship we have with our kids. So, we as we get older may lack empathy. And these little kids, when they're 2, 3, 4, or 5, they need a lot of empathy. I'm telling you right now. And so that we may do this. So we may have ask our grandkids to just respect and comply with what we do. So there's all kinds of reasons why 30% of us aren't involved, but we cause some of that.
Well, and as I think, I don't have any grandkids. I have two adult sons. Neither one are married. Neither one have kids. Um, and there are days that I think, oh, wouldn't it be great to be a grandparent? And then I realized, um, it would be great, but I like my life the way it is now. However, I think the same way when you become a parent, you have to make a decision that you're going to raise your child. And too many children today, and especially in the generation between the boomers uh, and the kids today, a lot of them made the choices that, hey, I saw my parents sacrificing. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to have my life. And so if I can afford it, I'm going to pay for daycare and all these other places for my kids to get the nurturing that they need. The reality of it is they don't get the right nurturing in those places. Now, I happen to have been a full-time working mom. My husband was a full-time working dad. But when we were home, we were there for our sons because we wanted to be parents. So you have to make that choice. And that goes for grandparents as well. If pickleball is more important than, sitting down and reading a book to your grandchild, then that's a choice you have to make. But then you may not have that relationship with your grandchild either.
Well, those are some of the reasons why we created our new website called babyboomer.org. And it's a site, and it started because as I was again finding out that so many of my generation didn't really want to get involved with their grandkids, that I wanted to have a place where we could all get together and do that. So the site we built not only talks about the past with our music and our movies and everything we did when we were growing up, but also about what we're dealing with now, retirement and travel and pickleball, and what we're going to deal with in the future, which is dementia and Alzheimer's and retirement homes and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we built this site. I mean, when you think about it, the baby boomer generation is diverse as any generation before or after it, whether it's politics or religion or ideas. We are very, very diverse, like any other generation. But the one thing that baby boomers have in common is this shared connected experience. When you think about it, when we were growing up, we only had 3 television stations.
Yeah.
We all had landlines. That's how we got our information. So we all grew up in the same world, in the same information. We were, it wasn't as diverse as far as how we learned things. When we were growing up, the experiences we had with the Kennedy's assassinations, Martin Luther King landing on the moon. When you think about all this, birth control became widespread, in our generation. Vietnam, was a major part of our generation. We had riots in the streets, but we all had, we loved the music, whether it was Elvis or the Beach Boys or the Beatles or Three Dog Nights or the Supremes. That was us. That was our generation. We had all the movies, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Jaws, or basically all of Spielberg's movies, Animal House, Star Wars, Godfather. These are all things that brought us together. And so that's why we created the site, so that people can come onto this site and, if they're grandparents and they want to learn how to do better, there's a whole section for that. If they're thinking about going into retirement, there's a great section for that. So we have pulled together 714 experts from all over the country that have 140,000 pages on our site, 122,000 podcast episodes, where we've got information to share with our generation to help them be better. Because a lot of what as we're growing older, one of the things we think about is what's going to be our legacy. What are we going to leave behind? What are we going to teach others? And again, that's one of the reasons I wrote this book is I want to leave something behind for my grandkids, about what do you do? How do you grow up? And so that's one of the reasons we created the site at babyboomer.org is to have a place where we can all go with our shared experiences and learn more.
Well, and that's what so many podcasts are about is sharing experiences, sharing our stories so that we don't feel so all alone, but that we can learn from each other as well. You know, when I started podcasting 13 years ago, I had this great idea that I was going to just find people up and down my street and I was going to have them, tell how they got from point A to where they are today. And then it was like, but I want more than that. I just don't want people in my own little circle. I want to grow out of that because I want to find out, you know, am I like other people? And once you start to realize the commonalities that you have, there's more kindness, there's more togetherness, and there's more understanding. And that's what I think that you have done with the site and with your writing about the grandchildren. You're bringing people together to say, hey, I want to know, you know, am I the odd one out? Or do other people feel the same way that I feel? Because there is no right or wrong way to feel.
You mentioned something that really is the heart of why we built this site. And it's the whole thing of kindness. It seems in this world we're just not kind to each other anymore. And I go back to my kids and my book and how do we influence this youngest generation? Again, this generation that's growing up right now is going to be the greatest generation this country has ever seen, just because the information they get. But throw out an idea that maybe your listeners can try that may help as these kids are growing older. You know, I tried this, and my kids tried this with their kids, 5, 6 years old. So it's not like I'm talking about the teenagers, but this is good for teenagers too. Is you know, ask them a question when you're having dinner at night is, what did you do today that was nice to someone else? Okay. Now, the first time you ask that question, the second time you ask it, they're going to think you're nuts. What do you mean? What did I do nice that was nice to somebody else? I mean, but then, whether it's opening the door or walking to a lady across the street, what did you do nice to someone else today? And if you start to ask that question every single night, then it's going to start to sink in. What did you do today that was nice to someone else? And before you know it, it's going to be in their mindset is I don't, I should be kind to someone else. But it all comes with us. It's the legacy that what are we going to leave? How are we going to teach these younger generations to be better than we were? Because I hope they are better than we are. I look at our world today; it's in chaos. I hope these generations grow up better than we ever were. And it's up to us as the elders in the room to make sure we get this message across to them. Again, going back to, we need to teach them how to think, not what to think. But if we ask them the right questions, it'll start to teach them how to think.
My father used to, once a week on Friday nights, he insisted that no matter how old we were sitting at the table, we were all together for dinner. As my brothers got older and they started dating, he would tell them, your date can start at 8 o'clock. We're going to have dinner. We're all going to be together. But he would go around the table and instead of asking us what nice thing we did, he asked if anybody did something nice for us. And one of the things I started to pick up on that, if somebody was doing something nice for me, boy, I owe them. I owe to be nice back to them. And I didn't realize that when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, but I think I was probably about 14 or 15 years old. My brothers no longer lived at home, so it was just my mother, father, and I on Friday night eating dinner. And my father said to me, you know, did somebody do something nice for you today? And I said, I did something nice for somebody. And he said, what did you do? And I told him, and he goes, then somebody did something nice for you. They allowed you to be nice to them. And I never thought about it that way. But if we don't offer that kindness to other people, they're not going to offer it back. So we have an obligation to be nice because we get paid back with that.
And we have the obligation to make sure that everybody surrounding us has the same mindset.
Right. Exactly. So, how can my listeners find your books and learn more about your organization? Because I think I have a lot of listeners who will be very interested in babyboomer.org.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to come onto the site. It's www.babyboomer.org and get you right onto the site. And again, we've got 300 different departments with all kinds of information. Well, in fact, one of the departments is called kindness. So good. I'm glad we hit on that. But again, it's for all of our daily needs, retirement, pickleball, travel, health. We got a whole major section on Alzheimer and dementia and Parkinson's. So it's all kinds of information that as we're getting older, that it's best. Now, what's interesting is when we built the site, we thought our audience was just going to be baby boomers. But what we are finding is their kids and their grandkids are coming onto the site trying to understand this generation.
Wonderful.
It's an interesting generation. So obviously there, or you can go to Amazon and buy my book. It's called again, I Don't Want to Turn Three. It's about my
I
six
love that.
kids. It all the pictures are based on photographs I took, and then we had an artist come in and do it. Like for instance, these are two of the kids actually in the bathtub. I took a
I
picture of
love
them,
it.
so we did
That
that.
is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. So it's easy to do that, or come to my site, grampsjeffrey.com.
Well, I will have all that in the show notes, so there's no excuse for people not to find the information. If for some reason, you misplace the show notes, you can always come to newclevelandradio@gmail.com and I will send you on to Gramps Jeffrey or babyboomer.com. And I want to thank you for joining us. And I hope you all enjoy a great, kind Thanksgiving. That's my wish to you and your family.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day now.
Bye-bye.